Los Angeles Dodgers just signed outfielder Kyle Tucker to a 4-year, $240 million deal. And that does not bode well at all for Atlanta's chances of extending Ronald Acuña Jr. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on into a special bonus edition of Braves Today on Friday, January 16th. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball, and you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, just like this podcast, also daily. We're probably part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app to see what the World Series odds have done after this signing. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So in case you went to bed incredibly early last night, the Los Angeles Dodgers, news broke that they have signed outfielder Kyle Tucker, originally of the Astros, spent last year with the Cubs, to a 4-year, $240 million deal. And it is quite frankly an absurd contract. It is... It only has $30 million deferred, $10 million in each of 2027, 2028, and 2029. He has a player opt-out after 2027 and after 2028, so after years 2 and 3 of the deal. And so he is going to get paid $60 million in cash to play baseball in the year 2026. The Dodgers are also way over the highest tier of the luxury tax. So they will pay $110 million, 110% on the calculated average annual value of the deal after those deferrals, which is $57 million. So they will pay an additional $62.7 million in luxury tax in year 1 of the deal. They are paying $122.7 million for Kyle Tucker to play right field in LA in 2026. It is an absurd contract on its face, ignoring the luxury tax situation. Kyle Tucker is a very good player. Kyle Tucker has never once in his career hit 6 WAR in a season. He has exactly 2 seasons in his career, one of them being only 78 games, where he exceeded a 900 OPS. Fangraphs put out the projected lineup for the Dodgers next season, and their $60 million man is probably batting 5th. Ohtani's leading off, Betts, Freeman, Will Smith, and then Kyle Tucker. Depending on if the Dodgers want to stack the 2 lefties and Freeman and Tucker back-to-back. They typically have not wanted to do that. They're paying $60 million for a dude to bat 5th. And there's a lot of stuff with this contract that's absurd. And we're going to get to, after the break, we're going to talk about how MLB has to fix this. Because I think it's clear that this is a problem and this has to get fixed. We're going to talk about that. But what I want to talk about right now is what this does to Atlanta's chances of re-signing Ronald Acuña Jr. Because he signed his pre-arbitration extension with Atlanta, 8 years, $100 million. He signed that back on April 2nd, 2019. And he is in the final guaranteed season of that deal. He is making $17 million this year. It is the 5th consecutive season he has made double-digit millions in this deal. At the end of this whole thing, he will have brought in $100 million. But when you factor in taxes and everything, his career earnings are about $73 million, which is not nothing. That's a ton of money. It's more than any of us make. Kyle Tucker will make Ronald's career earnings in a season and a month, right? And Atlanta has 2 more club options for Ronald at $17 million apiece for 27 and 28. And if they don't want him, right, if they decide they're not going to bring him back, which is absurd on its face, they would pay a $10 million buyout to get rid of him. So he's going to get $17 million in each of the next 2 years. The final one is 2028, his age 30 season. And then he's a free agent. Now, Ronald has said all of the right things about wanting to come back. He wants to be a Brave for life. He wants to get a new contract. He wants to be here. It's a little bit different from some of the people like, I talked about this the other day about Freddie Freeman, who clearly did not want to be here or else he would have made sure it happened, right? But if Kyle Tucker, a player who has, again, has twice and really once in a full season had an OPS over 900 and has never had a 6-WAR season, if he can get somebody to pay him $60 million a year for 4 years, then even when you account for the more severe injuries that Ronald Acuña Jr. has had, he is a guy who has 5 different seasons where he has put up a WAR over 900. One of them was a WAR over 1,000 in 159 games when he won the MVP by being the first 40-70 guy in baseball history. Kyle Tucker has 4 All-Star nods. He has 3 MVP finishes, one of them 5th place. Ronald has 5 All-Star nods, 4 MVP finishes, including 1 win, 3 Silver Sluggers, which Tucker has, I think, 2, and a Rookie of the Year award. It is very difficult to look at these 2 players on paper and say that Ronald is not better than Kyle Tucker. By conventional statistics, right? Career OPS for Kyle Tucker is 865. Career for Ronald is 908. By accumulation statistics, Kyle Tucker has 147 home runs. Ronald has 186. Both these guys have played 8 seasons. Tucker's played more games than Ronald. No, I'm sorry. Actually, Ronald's played more games. Ronald played 817 to Tucker's 769. There you go. Ronald's been healthier and up more than Kyle Tucker has. Ronald has 205 stolen bases. Tucker has 119. Their OPS plus is similar, 140 for Tucker, 141 for Ronald. Both of them don't grade out defensively that well in right field, but their arm makes up for a lot of their negative value on range and things like that. They're similar players, but Kyle Tucker is floor, Ronald is ceiling. Tucker has a very, very high floor. Only once has he had a full season where his OPS was not at least mid-8s, right? In 2022, he played 150 games and had an OPS of only 808. He hit only 257. Ronald has a very high ceiling. Tucker does not profile as the guy who will ever be MVP unless he has a crazy homer year. His highest number of home runs is 30. His highest number of stolen bases is 30. None of those happen in the same season. Ronald, by contrast, has 2 40-homer campaigns. He has multiple seasons with 30 or more stolen bases, including 73 in 2023, leading all of baseball. If Kyle Tucker's high floor got him $60 million, what does it cost to get Ronald's high ceiling? That's the issue here. And back when Juan Soto signed, I talked to some folks who had, who were roughly close to Ronald and said that he wants to stay in Atlanta. That is legitimate. He is not just saying that for the media. He wants to be here. But he also wants to get paid more than $17 million. And when you looked at the contract for Juan Soto, there was, I'm going to call it aspirational, right? He did not insist, or he did not say that he wanted to beat Juan Soto. But Juan Soto's making roughly $60 million a year or so, right? I mean, it's 15 years, $765 million. The average salary is $51 a year. The cash is really high until after the opt-out, right? And so the question was going to be, if Soto's making $51 million a year, average annual value, right? Would Ronald's discount be 40? Would that be a discount for Atlanta? Could you get him at 35, right? Is this something where you have to give out 2 Atlanta maxes, 44 million maybe, to get Ronald on a end his career contract extension with Atlanta? And I already didn't know if the Braves would go that far, either that long or that high dollar-wise to get him. But after Kyle Tucker just signed for $60 million a year, what's the new discounted amount for Ronald? Now, granted, Tucker's deal, it's a 4-year deal. Typically, when guys who are looking for long-term deals take something shorter, you have to pay them more on an average annual value basis to make up for that. The shorter the deal, the higher the money per year you have to pay them. Juan Soto was the exception because he got both an incredibly long deal and a very high AAV, because it could be argued that he was a generational option in free agency. For Atlanta to extend Ronald, do they now have to match the annual value of the Soto deal? And if that's the case, are they going to do it? I'm not convinced they will. All that the Kyle Tucker deal has done is make Ronald's eventual extension more and more expensive. And it's probably going to be in the next CBA. And I think at this point, you kind of have to wonder, is there going to be some sort of limiting factor in there that can help Atlanta not be dramatically outspent by the Dodgers? Because they have shown they have more money than anybody else, and they can give whatever contract they want to whatever player they want and ignore the financial repercussions of it. In just a second, let's talk about how to fix this, because it's got to be fixed. Let's talk about the possible ways to fix this. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. You're never going to believe this, but the Dodgers World Series odds, they're still number one. Fun story, they didn't actually get that much better. They're now at plus 220 to win the World Series. Yankees, Mariners are still second and third. Braves and Phillies are now plus 1,300, plus 1,400. So if anything else, if the Braves can knock off the Dodgers, you'll get a little bit more money, more of a return than you would have gotten before. If you want in on that action or any of the other action, right? Award totals. We talked about that on the regular scheduled Friday show. The Cy Young odds, the MVP odds. If you want get in on some of the home run totals. What is Judge going to hit in the regular season? What is Alonso going to hit in Baltimore? All that kind of stuff. Go to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Let's talk about how to fix this, because I think it's very clear this is a problem. Let me kind of, I'm not doing a mea culpa here, right? But I have been very, very pro player, right? I have been very anti-owner and pro player for a long time. Some of that comes from knowing players, knowing prospects, and then knowing them when they become major leaguers and all of that. It's just hard for me to side with the billionaire. It really is. There's going to be some sort of labor action next year. I've talked about it on the show, a lockout's instituted by the owners, and there is going to be something. And there's a lot of fans right now who are calling for that in the response to this deal. And 100%, this deal is a problem. I've been the kind of person, not every single deal, but a lot of the deals that have come out, I've pointed out that, hey, your team could have done that deal, right? Your team could have traded for Tommy Edman and extended him, right? Very few teams in baseball can do this deal. The Mets tried to offer something similar to this deal. The Mets offered 4 years, $220 million. They had opt-outs after the first 2 years, a larger signing bonus, and no deferrals. And he chose to go to LA anyway. But there's really just, these are the only 2 teams that can really afford to do this in baseball. And you're going to see a lockout. And the owners are going to use the lockout to push for a salary cap. The issue here is they are going to position a salary cap as a way to contain the players. And what they need to do is find a way to contain the Dodgers. The Dodgers, the Mets. We've seen Toronto and Philly be in this as well. The Yankees. I saw something going around social media, the top 10 largest contracts in MLB history. And there are a couple teams, like it is confined to just a handful of teams, right? The Mets have 2 of them, Soto and Lindor. The Dodgers have 2 of them in Ohtani and Betts. The Blue Jays have 1 in Vlad. The Angels have 1 in Mike Trout. The Yankees only have 1 in Judge. The Phillies only have 1 in Harper. The Padres have 2. Machado and Tatis. And Machado's a terrible deal. It's going to age horribly. But when you look at the largest contracts in baseball on a yearly basis, Dodgers, Mets, Phillies, Yankees. Texas is in there, Jacob deGrom. Dodgers, Yankees. Blue Jays are in there, Vlad. Angels are in there. Like, it's so many of the same teams. The lockout is going to be positioned as the owners trying to constrain the players. And the reason the players don't want a salary cap, let me just kind of explain this. And I'm not saying I believe this is the correct position, but let me explain. The reason the players don't want a salary cap, 1, they take pride in being the only major American sports league without one. But 2, they believe in the idea that you can get paid what a team thinks you are worth. There is not an artificial mechanism that limits how much you can get paid, like there is in the NFL, like there is in the NHL, like there explicitly is in the NBA. They have max contract amounts, right? In the NFL, they could pay you $100 million if they want. It would just hamper their ability to build a team because of the cap. The NBA literally has the max extension you can sign. They dictate the exact amount you can sign for. So that is why the players don't want it. And Bryce Harper, can't believe I'm saying this, made a great point a couple years ago. He said something about how things like that can sometimes, it's been attributed to Bryce Harper. I've never actually heard the words out of his mouth on video, but something like that, where the top is unchecked, can have a way of limiting the mid-range contracts that teams are signing, right? Because if you have to invest in one market rate deal for a superstar, you're not signing the superstar to that market rate deal and then 2 or 3 mid-range free agents. You're maybe signing 1 mid-range free agent and counting on 2 cost-controlled guys early. I don't know what the overall fix is for this. A salary cap feels like it would make sense. I don't see how a salary cap gets instituted to rein in the top teams without a salary floor. And the small market teams don't want that. And they have fought against that. The owners are not in agreement on this. The owners don't agree on what to do. They just have an overall goal of spending less money. But something has to change because right now there are 20 plus fan bases who feel like they have no shot at winning the World Series when you go into the season. None. And every league is going to have a couple teams that season who feel like they're not going to be competitive, but it's not 2/3 of the league. I guarantee you there is not a single rational Pirates fan right now that thinks they have a shot at winning the World Series. There probably aren't a lot of rational Arizona Diamondbacks fans who feel like they have a shot of knocking off the Dodgers. And they could. Toronto took them as far as they could go. Extra innings in Game 7. But then they went out and they paid a ton of money to a really good reliever. They signed Kyle Tucker to one of the largest contracts in baseball history on an annual value basis. Something has to change. And the problem is the owners are not on the same page. The financial structure of the game is not anywhere close to equitable. The reason a salary cap and floor work in football, work in basketball, is they're all working off of equivalent revenue bases. The NFL, every team gets the exact same amount of money from the national TV deals. MLB, it's regional TV deals. And some teams, like the Dodgers, are getting billions of dollars from theirs, while some teams, like the Twins and the Diamondbacks and the Padres, are reliant on what they can sell on streaming packages to their local markets. The money coming in the game is not equivalent. And the Dodgers are in a position where they have this massive bucket of money that they can throw at players that other teams just don't have. And a lockout doesn't fix that. A lockout does not solve that problem. Nothing that comes out of the lockout, unless it's deliberately engineered to handicap those tall teams, those high teams, fixes that. And that's the problem we have with baseball. Is the problem here is not the players. The problem are the teams that have financial advantages that everybody else doesn't have. The Mets are owned by a literal billionaire who spends his own money to sign players. The Dodgers are owned by a $1 billion hedge fund that have $1 billion coming in TV revenue, and they use that to sign any player they want to whatever deal it takes. The Braves don't have that. Even the teams that give out stupid contracts like the Phillies don't have that. The Yankees, who own their own network, aren't remotely in the same stratosphere as the Dodgers. So yes, this is a problem. Yes, there's going to be a lockout. They're going to suggest something like a cap. The underlying problem has not been fixed. The underlying problem is the Dodgers have so much more money than anybody else that there's no way for this to be on an equal playing field. Do you need to dramatically ramp up the amount of revenue sharing that those teams are required to pay? If you do that, you better tell the smaller teams that they have to directly spend it on payroll, and not now where they can just say they're spending it on improving the baseball product. Even that's not a guarantee. Something has to change. This has to get fixed. Problem is, nobody knows how. A salary cap is going to be thrown out there. That's the number one priority of the owners. It has been since before the Dodgers became this financial juggernaut. It's been their number one priority for decades now. Even a salary cap isn't going to prevent the Dodgers from buying the players they want. It's going to limit it, sure. But they have to get under it first. And how long is it going to take for them to get under it? It'll help. The players will never agree to it without a salary floor. And the owners will never agree to the salary floor. And that's your fundamental problem. The owners are not in agreement. All they want to do is spend less money. That's all they want to do. Adding a salary cap, theoretically, helps them spend less money. But to get them to agree to it, the players are going to insist on the salary floor, and the owners aren't going to do that. We'll see what happens. It honestly really sucks for anybody who wants to go into the season optimistic about how their team has a shot, especially in the National League, right? Like, we go back, Jake from Locked On Braves and I talked recently about the 90s Braves and about how, was it a failure you only won World Series when you went and played in like 5? I feel like in 20 years, we could go back and look at the 2010s or 2020s, I'm sorry, and say, is it a failure if you make one World Series and then you lose in the NLCS twice to the Dodgers? Is it a failure of a dynasty when you're going up against the biggest dynasty we've seen since those Yankees teams that Atlanta fought so hard in the 90s? I don't know. It's been a special bonus edition of Braves today. Come back at noon. We'll be dropping the regularly scheduled episode all about the Cy Young and MVP awards and what the Braves have to do, what Braves players have to do to win those. That was recorded before Kyle Tucker signed, so I don't know if LA's MVP chances have gone up for the guys in that lineup, but at the time of recording, that's what the odds were. In the meantime, this has been Braves Today.